welcome back to the Creative Color mini-series, and today what we're going to do is take a look at the color adjustment and the color enhancer. Now, before we dive too far into this, I have to have an idea of what I want to accomplish with the photo. So let's go ahead and jump over to that. Here we are inside of ON1, and as you can see, I have a photo of a park bench that I took a few years back, many years back really. I was still into photography and just thought that this would be cool. And here's the photo. Moral of the story, there's a lot of greens and there are a lot of darker browns. There's some yellows, there's some blues. So I have a lot of color that I can look at. Now, one of the first places that I recommend you look to see where your color lies in your photo is your histogram. If you're not familiar with the histogram, I'm going to go over that very briefly with you. Far left is the black, and the next little category, I guess, so to speak, and the way that I like to look at it is from this little triangle, which is your clipping views, all the way to the left. Those are like, this is where my blacks are, this line here. Starting from this particular edge of the clipping view up until this imaginary line that starts between the nav and the levels submenus, then those are my shadows. And then I have midtones between the levels all the way up to the info, the edge of the info. This is where my midtones are, so it gets two of these segments. And then this last segment, I start with my highlights, which then eventually end up into my highlights. Or I'm sorry, my whites. Now, that's a very elementary approach to it, but that's essentially how I like to look at it. Some histograms in photo editing applications actually break that down for you, and it's really nice to see, but in ON1, we don't have that grid layout. If there's a way to turn it on, please let me know. Nonetheless, as you can see, I have blues in the shadow area. So that's going to be this area right here. And as you can see, I hover my mouse over it. Let me just zoom in. And now, as I drop my hand on it, if you look over in the histogram, you can see that the blue channel says 192, the green channel says 172, and the red channel says 153. Now, one of the things that I didn't cover in the foundation videos is color is made up of red, green, and blue, and then just some sort of mix of those three colors, which that's what we get here, right? I get my reds, my greens, my blues, and this is saying that this has more blue in it than it does any of the other ones, but the second highest color is green. So when you mix blue and green, you start to get more of this like a darker blue, so to speak. And that's essentially what this is. And then of course there's some reds because there's the sun poking through. But that color balance or that color combination is going to be a little bit different if I come over here into my greens. So I have my RGBs reading as 154 green, which I think we would identify this as a green color, where my hand is, hovering over. We would say that that's green. Then of course you have your blues, and there's some reds in there as well. Now, we also have these oranges, which are going to be primarily red and green, so you can make that orange looking color. So you get the idea. All right. You want to check your histogram, and if you're not sure about a color, then just hover over it. You do have to understand a little bit of color theory of how this all works, but I'm going to make it very simple for you. The first thing that we're going to do is start with the color adjustment, because the color adjustment, this is like the basic color manipulation tool inside of ON1, in my opinion, besides the saturation and vibrance sliders in the develop module, right? If you never want to go outside of the develop module, you can absolutely use that. But once you come into the effects, I think this is the first go-to for anyone looking to adjust color. Well, since we know a little bit of information about our image, and I know that I want to increase these colors over here, I have a few different options that I can choose from. The very first thing I can do is just click on this eyedropper tool. and I want to adjust the saturation. I want to make these a little bit more of whatever color it is. I want to make it more of it. So I'm going to click the adjust saturation, click here, and then drag to the right. And as you can see, we guessed it, it was orange. And I'm increasing the orange value. Now, this is a little unnatural, right? And the reason for that is because typically when you increase something, the brightness changes as well. Now, I probably would not increase it by 26 points or 26. I'll probably bring it somewhere in that range. And I can even bring down, now that I know where that color range is, I can bring down my brightness to make it a darker orange, or I can make them more vibrant, right? So I'll probably bring it down to here. That seems to be okay. Now, the cool thing about this is I have the ability to mask in the range, right? So if I only want to affect those orange colors, and there's not much else in this image that was also of an orange tone, so I'm gonna actually go into changing the saturation of that grassy area, right? I'm gonna make it a little less saturated because that's just too much green. And now that actually chose more of a yellow. So let's zoom in, grab our saturation tool again, and we're gonna hover over until we start to see more green in our hue, or I'm sorry, in our RGBs underneath the histogram. And now when I click this, oh no, it's still selecting mostly yellow. And that's fine, because if that's the color, then that's the color. But maybe, because obviously there's some greens, we're just not able to click it. So this, I'll click the green channel, pull down on the saturation, and I'll start to desaturate the photo just a little bit so you can see what's happening. Now, let's reset this because that is not what I want. Instead, what I want is to adjust the saturation of this particular leaf. So we're just going to crank that up, and I want to make those more orange. Well, I also want to make these a little bit more of whatever color they are. So I'm just going to increase by clicking, and oh, it's also in that yellow range, right? So now we're starting to see more of this fall looking color. All right, so we'll probably go somewhere about there. That's gonna work for me. Now, I could have used the preset fall, but I'm not going to do that because sometimes you just want to play around with the sliders, right? Now we'll go into the color enhancer because we got the gist of how color range works, but one of the big things is, well, when do I use color enhancer versus color range? Or I'm sorry, color adjustment. Well, it's when you start to get a photo that looks like this. I think that there's too much orange in the overall image, and I want to adjust the color cast. So I'm just going to click auto and see what ON1 decides to do. And it cleans it up a little bit, but it really wants to just shift the tint. Well, I don't really care to do that. So what I'm going to do is bring the temperature slider down, and I'll even reset the tint because I don't think I need more magenta in the image. And I'm just going to bring this down a good amount, right? I want it to be fairly safe there. But what I also have is the ability to adjust the saturation of the image overall. And I think I need to add in a little bit of saturation just because I do want a little bit more punch in this image. As I mentioned in the saturation versus vibrance, saturation adds more of the color overall into the image, as you can see, where vibrance adds more color, but specifically to the midtones, and it brightens the image just a bit. So I'll probably do something like this. Now, this is way too strong of an effect for what I would care to have. And I want to make sure that I preserve my highlights. So I'm just going to click and drag my highlight slider up a little bit. And that's just going to bring some of the color cast out of the bench seat here. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that. It has that yellow vibe to it. So I'm just going to pull out and protect my highlights a little bit. And then maybe even pull some color out of the shadowed area. Like as you can see right here, it's a little orange. Then as I pull this to the right, look at that. It desaturates that. So I don't have too many colors, and I'm actually starting to dig where this is going. All right. But again, as I mentioned before, this is a little too strong of an edit. I'm going to go ahead and bring back my opacity to about 50% or 47, whatever. And that is it. Now, I used the color adjustment to get the overall color for my image, where then I added the color enhancer to adjust the color cast that I was starting to get on the image. Without the color enhancer, it's a fairly subtle adjustment, but you can notice it overall. And again, when you are manipulating color in your image, sometimes you are looking at the mood or the vibe or the feel of the image, and it's not always going to look like something did something, but it will feel like something happened. And it always is worthwhile to note that it's better to walk away from a photo and come back to it, maybe 15, 20 minutes later, just to see if you like that. Turn the effect off and on so you can pay attention and say, you know what, like, yeah, the colors got a little bit more pure in the highlights and the shadows overall, which is what I did here. And, I agree with that for now. But maybe I'll say, maybe it needs to be a little bit stronger. And now when I turn this off and on, I can really tell the difference. So, and to me, this is a little bit more of a washed out image. In fact, if I were to turn on my clipping mask, turn on you. Yeah, I can see that it's really bright there, really dark there. And, this may be something that you can fix in the develop module. I used AI Auto to tone this, so maybe I can just pull up on the blacks and, fix it that way. But that's not what this tutorial is about. So there it is. Well, color enhancer, color adjustment. Those are the two tools that I go to almost time and time again. Now, you could have done, and you can do, or I could have done, and I could have, whatever. You get the point. I could have masked in a lot or masked out a lot, but instead I decided to leave the edits as global. That's a decision that you would have to make, something for your own creative flow. So hopefully that this video helped paint the picture a little bit of what you can do unpacking your colors inside of your image using the eyedropper tool. That's probably the best way of using the color range. Especially if you're just starting out and you're like, I have no idea what colors I'm even looking at, because, we're not covering color theory, and that's something that for a whole nother day. But if you liked the video, go ahead and smash the like button. If you're new here, consider subscribing. My name's Chris. I am the content creator here at Free Will Photos, and you are in the Creative Color mini series. So until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.